Hello and welcome back to Week Slam with your host, Sam, where the goal of my channel is to try out a new hobby, interest, or activity for 1 week straight and give you guys the progress update about what you can learn in 5 days. This week's activity is learning to throw the boomerang. Despite being one of the quintessential traits of the outback, the boomerang's origins can be seen all across ancient Europe, with the oldest examples found in Poland around 20,000 years ago. However, the difference between these early boomerangs and their Australian counterparts is the ability to return after being thrown. The original non-returning boomerang was in fact used for hunting, and since hitting something mid-flight would stop it, returning to the thrower is virtually impossible. So, the TV myth of bonking someone on the head with your boomerang then returning it to your hand has been busted. Fast forward through the centuries, and with a little trial and error, the Aborigines of the Australian outback designed a type of curved boomerang that could return after being thrown, although this type is used purely for sport. This week, I'll be trying to master a classic returning boomerang with a design inspired from the Ocarina of Time.
What is up, YouTube? We are back on day number 1 of learning the boomerang. Apart from 2 other times with a total of maybe 20 minutes of practice, this is my first attempt at really learning. So the goal for today is to simply throw it and have it come back in my direction. Not worried about catching it, more focused on not getting smacked in the face. So let's go.
On the first day, I wanted to start with as little knowledge as possible, so I watched one 5-minute video and went from there. Not even 20 minutes into the hour, I started to pick up these little techniques that helped control where the boomerang went. The first thing I noticed was where you release the boomerang from in your hand. If you aim towards the ground, it has a tendency to go straight up, then shoot straight into the ground. But if you aim towards the horizon a little bit, you get better results. With a little trial and error, I also discovered that if you get it to spin more with less force, it'll float back to your location as compared to crashing like a rocket. On day 1, I wasn't quite able to catch it, but did see a good bit of consistent returns to where I threw it from.
Hey guys, welcome back to day number 2 of learning the boomerang. Today, we're back at the park with some pretty good winds coming through, and my goal for the day is to simply throw it and catch it at least once. Let's go.
Unfortunately, today was not the day I caught it. However, about halfway into the hour, I took a break to watch this video where I learned about these 5 important tips to remember when throwing a boomerang. The first tips are wind speed and direction, and are without a doubt the make or break factor when it comes to throwing a boomerang. They say the ideal wind speed is around 0 to 9 miles per hour, which I completely agree with. Wind direction is just as important because you need to be facing the wind and throw the boomerang at a 45-degree angle to the right in order for it to come back. The next tips to consider are the force behind your throw, the flick or spin of your wrist and tip of the boomerang, which is basically your hand position when holding it. If the boomerang is sitting in your hand straight up, imagine pointing it at 1 o'clock for the correct position. Even though I didn't catch it, I did notice it came back to my throwing spot a lot more than yesterday. So, fingers crossed for tomorrow.
What is up, people? We are back on day number 3 of learning the boomerang. We have a pretty good wind out here today, so I'm hoping I can just throw it and catch it at least once, since we weren't able to do it yesterday. Let's roll.
Today was the day I truly learned the importance of wind speed when throwing a boomerang. My first mistake was trying to throw it around 13 mile per hour winds in a lot bigger field than before. My advice is to not throw in a giant field because the wind acts more sporadic, so I went back to the smaller field from the first 2 days. However, even after going back, the wind was still too strong outside, so I had to wrap up about halfway through and resume later. The problem with strong winds like this is that they take the boomerang and run. So you'll see a clip of me jumping over a fence to go get it after a big old gust of wind threw it over. The good news is, after coming back later, I was finally able to catch it, and after struggling for 3 days, it was a satisfying victory.
Hey guys, welcome back to day number 4 of learning the boomerang. Today, we have a pretty good wind speed at about 8 or 9 miles an hour, so hopefully we'll see if I can catch it.
By day 4, I had the technique down pretty well, but was still battling with the elements. No matter how good of a thrower you are, if the wind doesn't want to cooperate, then it's not going anywhere. Which is what kept happening to me today. Even with the 9-mile-per-hour forecast, I noticed the wind kept dropping in speeds randomly, which would cause the boomerang to either fall short or go way off to the sides. This part was a little frustrating because it's truly out of your control and you're at the wind's mercy. I filmed this part around midday while the sun was still high, so that might have an effect on the winds, but honestly I have no clue. So even though the wind was being temperamental, I still had fun practicing today and noticed some good returns overall.
Alright guys, we have made it to day number 5 of learning the boomerang. Today, we have some pretty decent wind speeds at about 5 miles an hour, and I'm going to try and beat my record by catching it 3 times. Let's roll.
Okay, I have a quick announcement to make before throwing a boomerang. Look up and see what's above you. Right after filming the intro, I noticed I set up right below some power lines, and after nearly hitting them, I realized it's probably best to scoot back into the field. Today was a unique experience because I came across 2 things worth sharing. The first is that even though I was able to make it return to my position, a lot of the times it would be over my head and I couldn't reach it. I think this is fixed by lowering the position in which you release it, but I still haven't mastered it yet. The second thing I noticed is that on the times it was low enough to catch, it would either shoot straight into the ground like a bullet or fly in way too fast. I think this is because I kept putting too much force on the throw instead of focusing on the spin of the wrist like in that video. With these 2 things considered, I didn't actually catch the boomerang today, but came close a few times. All things considered, I'm happy with my progress and would say learning the boomerang was a success. And that is it for our week of boomerang throwing. Despite being relatively simple in concept, making a boomerang return consistently can be quite challenging, especially when you're relying on the wind, which is why I'd rate the overall difficulty 3 out of 5 stars. One thing I noticed after a couple hours is that the boomerang started to get little dings on the sides and edges from where it would hit the ground. I'm not sure if these bumps make much of a difference in the air, but figured I'd give you a heads up in case you wanted to start throwing. My parting advice is to remember the 5 tips of wind direction, angle, force, spin, and tip of the boomerang. If you want to try throwing a boomerang, you can honestly find a good one for like 20 or 30 bucks online. The one I was using is made by a guy named Vic, who makes custom boomerangs on his website, which I'll throw in the description below. Alright guys, that is it for episode 13 of Week Slam with your host, Sam. Don't forget to leave a comment below on what activity you'd like to see me try next, and if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share the video to help the channel grow. Thanks for watching and see you next week. But before you go, we're going to be spinning the viewer suggested Wheel of Slams to find out next week's activity. Alright guys, let's spin this wheel and see what's next. Okay. Next week's activity is